on politics in the country, on the run-up to the general election, and what it will do to our economy and our business.
Let's look at the immediate short term, then the medium term. The last quarter showed 7.6%. The third quarter, by all accounts, is expected to be even better. I don't think that this is isolated. I think the kind of events that have preceded this, I think the Honorable Prime Minister has demonstrated at the very least that good governance is good politics. Let me draw your attention to a small but significant aspect of this. Some of our poorest districts in the country, poorest both in relative and in absolute terms, and I know a little about this because one such district I have adopted, Sonbhadra. 112 of these aspirational districts were identified, and with the help of my friend and collaborator who drove the program from the Niti Aayog, these 112 districts witnessed not only a dramatic, transformational, developmental change in terms of grassroots level development, what happened to the health sector, what happened to education there, what happened to other, you name anything. The district I had, Sonbhadra, used to be at around 100, 110, and they revised these, I think, every quarter, these rankings, and ended up at number 1 and 2. Why am I telling you this? One of the interesting small stories, and I say small within quotes, but a very significant story, that if you look at how these aspirational districts in these 4 states voted, they voted overwhelmingly for development. And that explains the overwhelming victory of the Bharatiya Janata Party. That's the first submission I make, that the Prime Minister has taken development from the drawing board of exalted government ministries and platforms. He has taken it to the grassroots. The delivery of goods and services has reached there, number 1. Number 2, in terms of positioning of India, that positioning does not take place in a political or a diplomatic vacuum. People will come to you because they sense in this whole exercise an opportunity to make productive investments, to engage you, the kind of heavy lifting you've been able to do. So I think both in terms of taking the developmental narrative, those goods and services, to the farthest first. That was the philosophy of the 2030 agenda. But the Honorable Prime Minister has done this even prior to the 2030 agenda being launched by the UN, point 1. Point 2, today I think global turbulence, and by global turbulence you were kind, you admitted to, you referred to one of them, but that's only the one thing, that Russia, Ukraine, and our energy diplomacy. We are buying oil and energy from more sources than ever before. I think 39 countries. We are willing to enter into agreement when the chips were down and you needed to ensure availability, affordability, and sustainability, the trilemma on energy. As good corporate citizens, the OMCs did not let us down. They incurred losses, but India is the only country in the world where the price of petrol came down 11%. All countries in the world, otherwise, it went up 30-40% on an average, 70-80% in our neighborhood. But what does this mean? It means good politics. If instead of concentrating on ostensibly divisive things, I want a caste census, I want this, look at the narrative the opposition was trying to generate. Entire new lining, and I'm not surprised that they were trying to have a meeting of this, what is it called, the Ghamandiya Alliance, and they don't have any participants
India Alliance.
India Alliance. They don't have any participants. Mamta Didi doesn't want to go there. Now I read Samajwadi Party doesn't want to go there. I read somebody else doesn't want to go there. Look, you can't have people, and I like the way you introduced this, Arnab. You're much younger, but like me, you went to the right college. This gentleman here went to the wrong college.
Yeah,
he went to the wrong college. So you said you've always believed in putting the country first. And I think this is the kind of politics that the Indian voter, because the voter wants development, you deliver development. When the Prime Minister reduced excise duty on two occasions, November 21 and May 2022, brought the price of petrol down by 13 rupees, petrol in 13 and 16 rupees. BJP states reduced their VAT. The non-BJP states didn't. They kept talking, they kept spreading false narratives. And I think today they've been caught in a web of their own distortions. And I'm being very mild in my characterization.
No, I agree with you. Though you haven't completely answered my question yet about what this political continuity will mean for the Indian economy. You got a free run for the next 5.5 years.
I said, let me take with the immediate short term. I haven't come to the medium term. Medium term for me is the next 5 years. I think the results in these state assembly elections demonstrate again, at the very least, that 2024, the electorate, the voter, is overwhelmingly looking to the BJP to continue its development-anchored policies. That's one. What will that do? I am confident that $5 trillion economy is round the corner, but by the time you are into 2029, you will be looking at the trappings, the coordinates of India moving towards a $10 trillion economy. And I'll tell you what happens. I mean, whether you buy the Ernst & Young, whether you buy the Ernst & Young story about India being a $26 trillion economy in the 40s, in 2040, the fact of the matter is your per capita income is set to grow 5 times, 6 times. And if this is the kind of growth you are getting on a low per capita base, I think this is just the beginning of good things to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, along with this comes a different situation that we have in the world. And I have had this view, Mr. Kant, that till we are a 5 trillion economy, the world is curious about us. Between 5 and 10 trillion, which could happen in 5 years as Mr. Puri is predicting, there will be a little concern about us. But I believe that once we cross 10 trillion, which is post 2030, there will be no friendly relations anymore. There will be levers put on us. Other aspects will come. We'll become part of global conflict. We will be asked to take sides. Now, Mr. Puri very deftly managed, Mr. Kant, to navigate the waters after Ukraine. But isn't that going to be more and more difficult? I mean, what you achieved with the consensus in G20 was admirable. But on hard issues concerning only India, won't we get pushed into a corner? Won't we get into conflict? How will we manage our quote-unquote non-alignment? In the context of your experience of G20?
So Arnab, my view is that political leadership is very critical for the country, and you need consistency and predictability of policy, and similarly, you need continuity in leadership for a long time. And this is important if India has to raise its per capita income. It's important that we are now growing at about 7.7% in the first half of this year. I think we'll accelerate it even further. We'll take it higher to about 9% later. But what this will demonstrate is that our reforms carried out earlier, that goods and services tax, IBC, RERA, digitization, look at the extent of digitization. We have technologically pole vaulted. We are doing about 46% of the real-time payment in the world. We are doing 11x of what USA and Europe do. We do 4x of what China does. Unlike giving large packages which the US and Europe gave, we put money straight into the bank accounts of 800 million Indians. And today we are putting money of 700 different schemes straight into the bank accounts. Now, our digital model is being copied by both USA and Europe because they've taken a different approach where big tech had driven innovation. In Europe, in America, it was Meta, Google, Apple, and in China it was Tencent and Alibaba, whereas in India we created a public interest layer on top of which private sector innovated. My experience of G20 is that India is the only country which has demonstrated both political leadership and technological leadership and was therefore straddled the world of G7, all emerging markets, Russia, China, all together. We had in the New Delhi Leaders Declaration of G20, we had 83 paras, but we had 205 outcomes. Not a single reservation, not a single footnote, not a single negative statement, 100% consensus by all the leaders all together. This was unparalleled and only India could have done it. And therefore, in the future, in the coming years, if the world has to accelerate its pace, it's important to understand that almost this year, 80% of the growth is coming from emerging markets led by India. In the next 2 decades, 2/3 of the growth will come from emerging markets, according to IMF. 6 of the fastest growing countries in the world are African countries. And what India demonstrated by making AU, what Prime Minister Modi demonstrated by making AU a permanent member of G20 was that this will be a more inclusive world where the emerging markets will drive growth and prosperity, and India will be the leader as far as driving growth is concerned.
I want to come in very briefly on that. I think Amitabh makes several very important points. I just want to pick on 2 of them.
Sure.
One is, no matter which way you look at it, at the time that the Honorable Prime Minister presided over and hosted G20, the world was deeply divided. It still is deeply divided. But we played unifier, and I think those 205 outcomes and those 83 paragraphs in the Leaders' Declaration, they will provide the template for both multilateral and plurilateral discussion across a wide canvas. So that is the first point. But there's a more important point out there. There's no other show in town. The Security Council is deeply divided. That is the agency entrusted with the task of determining whether there is a threat to peace and security, and then authorize countermeasures. Security Council is paralyzed. Today, the Prime Minister has taken the Indian leadership of the G20 and shown that when the multilateral system has got bogged down, the Security Council is paralyzed, India can deliver on the international diplomatic horizon through the G20. And I think it's going to be a very hard act to follow. I'm an admirer of Brazil. I think Brazil will work on it. Brazil and India share much. But as I said, it's going to be a tough act to follow. And I think today, the world needs India more than India needs the multilateral system.
No, but there is a worry that we can get into this self-congratulatory mood.
There's no congratulations.
No, with 2 very eloquent people, government doing well, you won an election, mood is good, you are going to sweep 2024. The danger is you might get into a self-congratulatory mood. That both of you,
unlikely.
Pardon me?
Unlikely. All I was saying is your business channel
Yes.
is born under very positive planetary configurations. India is doing well, Indian business is doing well,
Thank you.
and more than that, you bring a good business channel onto the market which has the right kind of narrative, India first, business support.
Well,
look, wealth is not going to be created by everyone.
Yeah.
You need to create the wealth so that it percolates down to the villages and to those who have been marginalized and
But
deprived.
that's my concern point. My concern point is, you're doing very well despite some worrying numbers. 1 minute, sir. If you're doing very well when there are worrying numbers on the other side, there is a concern we have that you're not going to address those issues. You know, for example, let me take the issue of unemployment. Let me take the issue of unemployment. Now, if you had done badly in the state elections, you would have worked harder on unemployment. For example, today you would say we are sweeping the elections when, as per CMIE estimates, and I know you may disagree with CMIE estimates, the unemployment rate in November was 9.16%. You mentioned a 7.5% quarterly growth number, which is superb, up from 6.9% estimations. But 9.16%, I know it fell from 10.05. It fell from 10.05 in October. Now, this is a decline. But the worry is, it is piggybacking on unemployment going down in rural areas in a Rabi sowing season. Rabi sowing season. So it may also be seasonal decline of unemployment. Allow me to complete, sir. My point is, so many young people here, sir. 40% of this country is below the age of 25. We want stellar growth, but we want unemployment to come to tolerable levels below 6%, 5%. I'm sure you'll agree with me, and we need something like a delivery mechanism on that. People are very restless.
I agree with all the objectives you're outlining, but I'm also requesting you to have a look at what the perspective is. Where are we going? Unemployment is coming down, number one. My bigger worry, I'll tell you very frankly, even at the risk of being misunderstood, my bigger worry is that we are producing jobs, but the skill sets required to manage those jobs. I travel relentlessly around the country, and so does Amitabh. So do many of you. Wherever I go, as if people have got the jobs, there are job opportunities available. I'll give you a small example. I happen to be also Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs for the last 6.5 years. When we give an advertisement, and one of my organizations and I are working on a plan, you give an advertisement for unskilled labor, you get a lot of people. You give an advertisement for skilled levels of plumbers, carpenters, mason, very few. Now the point is, at this rate of economic growth, where the benefits of employment are available, rural, semi-rural, demographic shifts from rural areas to urban areas, we are doing a lot on the skills front, but it takes time for this to adjust. My own view is that...
But you run the education system. You provide the manpower. You have the Skill India mission.
So I think,
Arnab, I agree with your problem, but it's for you to get the solution.
On that, let's put the issue in a proper perspective.
Okay.
See, jobs get created when you accelerate the pace of growth. It's important to understand that this country in the last 8 years has created 40 million houses. It has provided 120 million toilets to its citizens. It has provided 253 million piped water connections to the citizens. I mean, no country in the world has been able to do this. It has built 88,000 kilometers of road in the last 8 years. The Bank of International Settlement has said that what India has achieved in the last 8 years would normally have taken India 50 years to achieve. 50 years to achieve, one. Number two, the capital expenditure in the last 3.5-4 years of India has increased from less than 1% capex spend through budget. Correct. Has increased actually from 1% to close to about 4%. There has been a 592% increase in capex over the last 5 years. And it has never happened in the history of India.
No. And 30% increase every year to 10 lakh crore.
33%. So when you do this kind of capex spend, and let me tell you, the quality of our infrastructure, our roads, our airports, etc., are today better than Europe. So my view is, if you are providing growth, if you are doing capex expenditure, and if you are taking care of providing equity through housing, water, through sanitary, through toilets, you're taking care of everything at the grassroots level. Correct. There is no way India will not grow with equity in the future.
I'm not denying that.
What India has and this growth rate with capex now, private capex now increasing, the latest figures show that private capex has kicked in and is showing a huge growth. What I foresee is, unlike many other economists who may say many things, but my view is that with this reforms continuing, capex expenditure continuing, expenditure at grassroots level continuing, you will see the growth rate accelerating to 8.5 to 9%.
I welcome that, and I think that's amazing, and we are all very, very happy about that. However,
that's why
Mr.
you have
Kant,
selected your launch of Republic Business, as Mr. Puri said, is the best possible. Stars are aligned in favor of Republic Business.
Thank you. This is the second time you say thank you very much for that, sir. My point is, I'm completely with you, but I'm just asking a question a broader way. Give me a minute to explain it. 5 years back, and you were such a seasoned diplomat, Mr. Puri, if in geostrategic terms anybody would have asked a professor in any global Ivy League university, how do you rate or place India in the global comity of nations, we would have been called a middle power. Today, I genuinely believe that within a few years from now, or even potentially now as the way we are moving, we will be called a great power. Question is, in economic terms, if we can move so fast geostrategically, in economic terms, two factors are matter of concern to me. Our GDP per capita is still 1/4 that of China. Point number one, sir. Point number two, reality. The amount of imports we have from China in terms of manufacturing and manufactured items, which we can fully do in India with the Made in India scheme with so many PLIs, Indian businesses are still heavily dependent on Chinese imports. Our per capita is still 1/4 that of China. So while we are seeing the visible growth when we go to an airport, when we go to an infrastructure, the fact of the matter is that we are not outrunning China. And when I said let's not get into a self-congratulatory mode, so we are now contributing about 5 to 6% of global growth. China is contributing upwards of 25 to 30%. We need to get into double-digit contribution in terms of global growth. How can we quicken the pace?
First of all,
Quicken the pace.
I would, Arnab, encourage you not to flatter yourself and me and all of us with retrospective effect. 5 years or 8 years ago, nobody would have called you a middle power or this thing. Let me be very clear. References to you in 2013-14 would have been you are part of the fragile five. And fragility is something which is very easily defined in terms of this discourse. Today, you have demonstrated, and this I think is a very great quality of the Honorable Prime Minister, and I have to be very careful with my words. He knows how to convert a challenge into an opportunity. When Amitabh was giving you the figures of 4 crore homes being built, I know something about it in the urban sector. Look at the amount of steel, the cement. We've done calculation for 100 units of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, how much of steel and cement comes. I don't want to bore you with those statistics, but they are mind-boggling. Today, your capital expenditure goes up for 7.5 lakh crores to 10 lakh crores, etc. I know my oil companies. They produce about 20-23% of the country's revenue. They've already done 62% of their capital expenditure spending, and we're only in the month of beginning of December. I'm saying something else. It's not where India will go. India will go up, I have no doubt. If today the Chinese economy has done very well on account of the opening measures, I believe, Amitabh can correct me, they started opening up 12 years before we did, number one. Number two, please look at the Chinese statistics today. I'm a member of I'm a union cabinet minister, so I have to be choosing my words carefully. Today, there are very few people who will bet on that rise story, because there is a certain challenge there. Our challenges we've embraced, and those challenges on every front have been converted into opportunities. I don't think the name of the game is competing with China. The name of this game is to lift. Look, the Millennium Development Goals did well because China lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. The Sustainable Development Goals will do well because India will do well, and because India will do well, the SDGs will do well. That is the latest story. Today, businesses always look for places to locate. And I think that the location or relocation and India being a manufacturing destination, the fact there are entrepreneurial forces here which are being unleashed. And employment, please, let's take a bigger look at it. If the unemployment factor were what it were, you would not get these political results. Point one. Point two, today you have employment generation by this younger lot of people. I mean, look at the number of startups. I am so impressed when I go to any of these sectoral meetings, what they're doing in the energy sector, what they're doing elsewhere. There is that spirit of achievement. And today they are competing. I'm not talking about digital and financial inclusion. All those are well known. Believe me, 5 years from now, when we will be, I would encourage my friends in the opposition either to join in this or start worrying about the 2029 election. But today we are in a situation where India is the story around.
But when global growth will fall to 2%, which is predicted to in a year,
I'll tell you
impact on India?
No, see, I'll tell you, we have to be careful what happens to the global growth. Because if you analyze your GDP today, whatever $4 trillion, 50% is in the external sector. The value of goods imported and exported, the value of remittance. But today you are able to revitalize and re-energize the domestic market if you see what is happening. But what will continue to happen? I mean, I'll give you a small thing. The millet thing started. I'm just giving you a small example. Today there's so much demand for millet, the millet prices have shot up. There are things we are doing. I think that the major economies in the world, now major economies, where is the real growth? It's not going to take place in one country that you've been describing. Europe also has signs of worry, but the United States, Africa, Latin America, I don't think the global situation will impact. We'll just have to find new markets and new opportunities as we go along.
So Arnab, just a few points. One is, I don't think India should get into this business of comparing itself with China because we are two different political systems. China doesn't have a lively, vibrant, argumentative republic channel which India has. Secondly, I think it's important to understand that our story has just begun. In the next 5 decades, India will see 500 million people getting into the process of urbanization. And the latest figures of growth story really now show that India's manufacturing sector is growing at about 11%. The story is that India is firing on all cylinders. It's firing on services, firing on manufacturing. It is now moving with smart urbanization, focusing on sustainability. There's a huge energy transition taking place. And I think more than anything else, there's a massive focus on enhancing agricultural productivity in the years to come. So if you keep firing on all 4 cylinders, your share of global growth will keep going up. And that's what IMF and World Bank are
do pockets of the country may be ruled by other state governments which have huge debt, huge joblessness, a lot of chaos, worry you? For example, in Bengal, there was a business summit recently where Mamata Banerjee went on record and she's told foreign investors, you see, the central government is not giving me my share of GST. They take money from me, they deny me my share. There is a different approach there. And while the BJP, after these state elections, rules 17 states of the country, out of them 12 directly and 5 in coalition, I am concerned sometimes, Mr. Puri, at this gap that's building up in the difference in policy approach. You may not be, but levels of debt, freebie schemes, fundamentals of the economy, economic thinking can't be so disparate.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with the Honorable Chief Minister of Delhi, and he says, "Ke metro ko free kar do." So I said, you make up your mind. Do you want the metro to become like the Delhi Transport Undertaking bus, or do you want DTC to become like metro? So this debate on freebies, this debate on let me incur a debt and let the center pay for it, it's not going to work. I started by saying that the Prime Minister has demonstrated today that clearly good governance, which means the kind of things that Amitabh and I have been talking about, these produce results in terms of the development and also good politics. You've been rewarded for that. And if you deviate from that, I think we'll have to take the consequences. So I see this freebie politics is now reaching a point where the public understanding and public impatience will let it go. You cannot sustain. There were two states, one which just lost an election. They had about a 5 lakh crore debt. Yeah. Punjab, when I was there some time ago, they had a 3 lakh crore. I believe they will take it up to 5 lakh crore. And then they will collapse. And let me tell you, this narrative, अगर center takes away GST, so अरे भाई वो जो finance commission भी देते हैं, उसको भी देख लीजिए अच्छी तरह. But there's another issue, which I can tell you. People are fed up with this whole victim card. Nobody gives. I had two young leaders of a party which is in dire straits turning around and telling me us कि ये center GST पे बहुत collect करा petrol and diesel पे. अरे भाई नहीं GST. So ये false narrative is becoming a kind of open season, and I'm quite confident it's not going to work. And you see the results of these state elections going in that direction and providing hope. Look, there is a complete umbilical link between
you made headlines when in Rajasthan, you said that if BJP comes to power in Rajasthan, you will ensure that petrol is cheaper by some 11 rupees.
No, 12 rupees I said.
11 rupees 80 paisa.
Anna, we sell in BJP.
Why did you say that, Mr. Puri?
Because it's very clear. In a BJP ruled state, petrol sells at 96 rupees a litre. In Rajasthan, it was selling at 108.
So I'm asking you, give me a breaking news story. People in Rajasthan are watching.
Well,
when is the price falling by 12 rupees?
I am not in running for the Chief Minister's job, but the 3 or 4 people who are in the running for the job or who are being considered,
no, but
I'm sure they would want to ensure.
But wasn't that populism, like absolute populism?
This is not populism. This is the kind of VAT that you charge. Look, if you make energy, petrol or diesel expensive, doesn't benefit you in the long run. Because today, if the economy is growing 7.6% last quarter, you have a situation, Arnab, where that economic growth means more energy consumption means more growth. So if you make, like aviation turbine fuel, when I was civil aviation minister, some states were charging fantastic amounts of tax. I said, nobody will come to fill up here. They will go to states like Gujarat, which charge only 1%. So they brought their ATF rates down. Okay,
so I have one question here, and I'm going to wrap this up in a couple of minutes. But this is important for both of you. Amitabh, you go first, and then, you see, Mr. Puri deflects some questions. I will put this to you so he doesn't get a chance to deflect, and then you deflect it to him. You see, there are things which happen. They play hockey, they're playing ice hockey with me right now. You see, there are things which happen which cannot be predicted. For example, the coming of the Israel-Hamas war, right, which triggered the oil prices. I'm putting this to him deliberately. And then which triggered the oil prices to spike by 4 or 5%. Now, we are importing 75-80% of our oil consumption. Now, inflation is still 9% plus. Right? Unemployment is still 9% plus. Inflation is still high. Unemployment is high. There is a possibility. We always say that if this emerges into a bigger conflict, and we are asked to take sides. See, we did not take sides. We looked at national interest, and it worked very well. Will we be able to do it every time? And if we can't, then what is the impact on our economy? Will we get a blow?
So let me put it in...
how long can we stay away from pledging to an economic bloc?
So, two things. Arnab, since you're a business channel now, it's very important to tell you that we are now producing 185 gigawatt of renewables. Secondly, the green hydrogen mission. The Prime Minister has said that we are an importer of fossil fuel, about 160 billion. But by 2047, we'll be an exporter of energy. We will use renewable to crack water, produce green hydrogen, become the biggest producer of green hydrogen, and we'll be exporting green hydrogen in its liquid form, ammonia. And that is what all his oil companies are doing now. They are the drivers. So that is on the positive side of what we are doing. Secondly, when the oil crisis arose because of the Russia-Ukraine war, or when we've looked only at our national interest, No other country has been able to do what India has done in its oil procurement. And this government, Mr. Hardeep Puri, was able to negotiate and get the best deal for India.
Will we be able to do it again?
Yeah.
Especially when the Chinese yuan comes in between.
Yeah.
Will we be able to do it for a longer period?
First of all, Arnab, I think some things need to be stated up front. There is no shortage of oil in the world. An oil producing cartel, OPEC Plus, decides how much oil it wants to release. They cut 1.5 million barrels a day earlier, and they did another 1 million barrel cut now. But the price didn't go up, it came down, which means there is a mismatch between OPEC action and the markets factoring in on them. I don't anticipate any difficulty on the availability front. Insofar as the affordability front is concerned, I think what Amitabh is saying is very important. We've gone biofuels blending 10%, we've reached 12%. In 2014, we've done 1.4%. We had a target for 2030 of 20%. We are bringing it 25%. We are moving breakneck speed ahead. Even the war there, I have to be very careful on what I say. As the Prime Minister says, this is a time for peace. I hope that is what works. But in the coming months, our ability, you see, if supply chain gets disrupted somewhere, obviously, you talked about the Chinese supply chain, but we recovered very quickly.
True.
But we've also learned our lesson. Don't be overly dependent on one supply chain. Diversify your supply. I think with all these energy measures we are taking, and I know we don't have too much time, we will have a situation where the India story gains in strength rather than gets overcome by global perceptions of global turbulence.
Well, I've loved this conversation. We've discussed China, we've discussed GDP, per capita GDP, oil, global uncertainty and geopolitics. I find in both of you a lot of pragmatism, and I find you both extremely positive about the role ahead. You're going to play a big role in the Indian economy in the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you very much. Mr. Kant, I know you have a flight to catch, and Mr. Puri for launching Republic Business ever in your debt. And you came on a day when Parliament is on. So I'm so happy about that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
All set to become a developed nation by 2047. The Indian growth story is an unparalleled success. Be there at the India Economic Summit Sustaining the Dream Run, coming up on 5th December in New Delhi. From satellites to semiconductors, India is on an economic growth highway. Join us at the India Economic Summit Sustaining the Dream Run on 5th December in New Delhi. With over 100 unicorns and more waiting to come up, it's time to celebrate India's entrepreneurial spirit. Join us at the India Economic Summit Sustaining the Dream Run on 5th December in